to see how relevant the topic of Pakistan Society of Development Economists, the Pakistan economy, the way forward is. For that, I would request President, Pakistan Society of Development Economists, Dr. Asad Zaman, to give his presidential address on the topic.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Presentation कहाँ है? अच्छा, मेरे पास कोई है इसकी stick क्या? I'd like to welcome you all to this first meeting and especially thank Minister Saab and all the other distinguished guests for coming and making this a success event. And what I will talk about is an aspect of development which is not very often discussed for reasons that I will also explain. Right. Okay, so basically I'm going to talk about the hidden dimensions, the inner dimensions of development, the human development as it is called. And so basically I frame it within the context of Islamic economics. So first we must start by acknowledging that wrong theories have had enormous cost. Some of these are obvious, but much more is hidden, like the glacier, of which only 10% shows. The cost of the wrong theories which we are using to guide the development process has been incalculable. The global financial crisis is an obvious one. Increasing massive inequality is visible. There are 50 people who own half the planetary wealth, while billions of people are hungry. There is a looming environmental disaster. People are saying that the planet will not be habitable by human beings by 2050 unless we change course. More than half of the species in existence for the past millennia have been wiped out recently due to human activities. Oceans have been polluted, atmosphere has been polluted, jungles are destroyed, polar ice caps have melted, coral reefs. So it's really destruction on a mass scale, and there's no sign of slowdown. So there is an alternative paradigm. There's another way to think about what development is, and that is the Islamic paradigm. About 1450 years ago, the message of Islam created a revolution. Ignorant and backwards Arabs launched a civilization which enlightened the world for 1,000 years. One thing that is not mentioned in conventional histories, it seems that the European Enlightenment was a spontaneous event, which it was not. Actually, it was the Islamic Spain, which the reconquest of gave Europe access to millions of books in the libraries of the Muslims, and that is what launched the enlightenment of the Europe, which the effects of which we are seeing today. So even the light that was launched in 1450 years ago is still enlightening the world. So what is the secret of this revolution? And can it be replicated today? This is the question that. So the truth is that Islam, it is said, it was prophesied that Islam came as a stranger and will become a stranger. And colonization of the globe took place. And one thing that is not well understood is that colonization is not just physical, but it is mental. So colonization is primarily a conquest of knowledge, of ways of looking at the world. So the training system devised by Macaulay eliminated the indigenous culture and substituted by ways of thinking that belong to an alien culture. So the effects of this has been shown by Tariq Rahman in his recent book, Denizens of Alien Worlds, which shows that basically the elite class of Pakistan lives in an entirely different world from the masses. So while political freedom of some sort has been achieved, minds are still chained by the trappings of colonial thought. So one of the main things that I have found as a teacher is that the students don't have the confidence to create new ideas because they feel that we are far behind. And so the antidote this is that we look at the social science that we are teaching and we consider it as absurd. I mean, this is not something that is to be taken seriously. We just laugh at it rather than engage with it. So, for example, we teach in our courses that the purpose of life is to make money. Really, one shouldn't even engage with this idea. It's just ridiculous. Similarly, the idea that microeconomics teaches that human behavior is predictable, robotic, mathematical, it can be calculated by formulas, this is just something to laugh at. It's not something to debate or discuss. We all know that my actions cannot be described by any formula. Similarly, economic theory as a whole teaches what I would refer to as the Coca-Cola theory of happiness, that the more you eat and drink, the more you, and the object of life is to maximize the pleasure we get out of consumption. Come on, that's all we need to say. Selfishness and cutthroat competition, this is the way to organize an economic society for efficiency. Ridiculous. Now, the prisoner's dilemma is a big puzzle for economists. If everybody cooperates, everybody is better off. But if people betray the social contract and look for their own advantage, then everybody is made worse off. Now, this is a puzzle? This is not a puzzle. I mean, this is what life is all about, that we cooperate socially for the mutual benefit. The idea that we should betray others and look to our personal advantage at the cost of group, this is just ridiculous. And to think that this is rational behavior, that's even more irrational. Similarly, there's this ultimatum game which continues to puzzle economists. If I give some person some money and ask him to share it with others or to keep it all himself, we find that human beings share, even though maximization would involve their keeping it all for themselves. But this is how societies work. If everybody was selfish, society wouldn't function. So there is a serious issue on which I have written longer papers, but here I will just very briefly pass by it. Why is actually the economic theory that we have is very, very seriously deficient? Why is that so? There is a whole huge, long and complicated history. Basically, in Europe, there was Protestant revolution, the Reformation, and there were violent and vicious and very, very cruel and ruthless struggles between different religious groups in Europe, which soured the Europeans on the concept of religion itself. And there was a loss of faith. And loss of faith is always a traumatic event. And so one of the consequences of this trauma was that knowledge was redefined to exclude the heart and the soul. So Descartes, who is considered the father of Western philosophy, he said, "I think, therefore I am." Now this is an enormously significant statement. One should reflect on what this means. If I think about my own existence, then I am aware of the tingling sensation on my skin, my heart is beating, I am breathing. All of this is to be excluded as evidence because we no longer trust our experience, because this is where religious impulse comes from. It comes from the heart. It comes from the feeling of awe in front of God. These feelings have to be excluded from knowledge because they misled us. They made us believe in a God who isn't there. So now I'm not going to trust my heart. I'm not going to trust my soul. I'm not going to trust my experience. I'm only going to trust the brain. So the model of the human beings that we see is the brain floating in a vat. The only thing that counts as evidence is my thought. So I think, therefore I am. Not I feel, therefore I am. This idea continues to haunt Western intellectual tradition, but I won't go through that because that's not. So actually, if we come to the Quran, the heart is clearly described as a sense organ, that we created for you the eyes and the ears and the heart, and that it is not the eyes which become blind, it is the hearts that are blind. So in order to sense the world, we have to open our hearts to it. Now, the entire edifice of contemporary Western thought rejects the idea that the heart is a sense organ. And of course, the soul doesn't exist because it's not a material. This leads to absurd models of human beings, human behavior. Because if you take the heart out of the picture, how can you understand human beings? Human beings consist of the heart, the soul, and the mind. Actually, Islamic philosopher has said that there are 3 different dimensions. The heart is the source of feelings. It feels guilt, pain, shame, anger. The soul is the source of desires, and the brain is the source of thought, and these 3 have to be held in balance. An imbalanced personality can be led by his desires, or they can be led by their heart, or they can be led by the brain. Now, the intellectual tradition of the West is solely brain and no heart and no soul. So this leads to a complete ignorance about the sources of human welfare. What makes people happy? Is it just eating and drinking? No. Actually, if you study happiness, you find that humans are social. It is actually loving, being loved. These are the things which people enjoy a lot more than Coca-Cola. So, the Easterlings Paradox is that Richard Easterlin, my colleague at UPenn, studied the process of economic growth and does it lead to improved happiness? And he came to the surprising conclusion that it does not. He looked at many kinds of global evidence. Are the rich nations happier than the poorer nations? No. Are the nations which have quintupled or made their standard of living increase by 10 times, have they become happier as a result? No. So all of this led to the Easterlings Paradox. Now what I would like to think of, what I would like to discuss is that actually the idea that this is a paradox is itself a paradox, that we should know. If we look at our own hearts, we will see that money can't buy happiness. And this used to be well known to human beings before hegemonic culture, which makes the pursuit of money the object of our lives, dominated our thoughts. And now people are in doubt that maybe money can make me happy. So even this has affected all fields of knowledge, even behavioral psychology. One would think that the psychologist would know more about the feelings and the hearts and the souls of man, but it is not true. They only focus on external observable behavior. So the possibility that human beings can change, the hearts can change, this has been ignored. So throughout history, the drivers of change have been inner and spiritual. If you look at the greatest developmental episode in the history of mankind, the advent of Islam, this was driven purely by internal change. Human beings changed, and then they changed the world. People who were killing each other for small things and burying their own daughters alive, they became people who fed others while remaining hungry. Throughout, people who have studied the rise of civilizations have said that they have originated in a spiritual change which created community, unity, and it united people for a common purpose, and this has been the driver of change throughout. So Max Weber wrote The Protestant Ethic in the Spirit of Capitalism, and he described that the engine of capitalist growth was the Protestant ethic. And how was that? Well, for long and reasons which I will abbreviate here, Protestants came to believe that working hard and earning money was a sign of favor of God. So they started earning money and working hard without actually, while living an austere lifestyle. So this is a paradox, a contradiction. If you want austerity, you don't need to earn money. But they did both of these things, and that was the engine of growth. Similarly, many people who were farsighted in the 60s, they predicted the rise of China in East Asia, because they said that these people have the Confucian ethic, and that's will drive honest bureaucracy, and that will be the driver of growth. So throughout history, the drivers of change have been internal. It's the hearts of men which change. So this is also written in the Quran, that Allah Ta'ala does not change the condition of people until they strive to change themselves. So how do we create change? What the question we are facing is, how do we create change in Pakistan? What is the way forward? So basically there are 4 dimensions that I would like to point out, which is, one is that you have to have the normative. What is the ideal? What is the target that we are aiming for? Then there is a positive dimension, which is a description of where we are currently, a realistic description which looks at what we are. Then there is the transformative dimension. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? And then there is the evaluative dimension, that how do we judge whether we are making progress or not? This is very important. In this, Islam is very different from economics in that it is process-oriented and not consequential. So the evaluative dimension in Western economics is, have we got more goods? But in Islam it is, are we making the right struggle? So it's how you play the game, not whether you win or lose. That's the process orientation. So if we look at the Islamic concepts, there is Homo Islamicus, which is an ideal personality type. In economics, we have Homo economics, which is everybody knows. In Islamic concepts, we have heart is the battleground between good and evil, and we are constantly faced with the choice. In economics, we are robots. We follow one principle of utility maximization. Every human being has immense potential to achieve excellence. And basically life is about realizing this capability that is hidden within us. And this occurs through spiritual progress. But in economics, human beings are forever stuck in the bottom stage of spiritual development. They are like children who are motivated purely by pleasure and pain, and they never grow up. So the fundamental problem of economics is considered to be scarcity, not having enough goods. Again, this is pretty childish. True richness is contentment of the heart, as our Prophet said. Scarcity is a way of thinking, not an objective reality. If you give a man a valley of gold, he will want another, as it is said. And there's a Harvard survey of 4,000 millionaires, which showed that 75% of them feel financially insecure. They don't have enough money. So obviously earning money is not the cure to feeling secure financially or to ending scarcity. So instead of that, we teach abundance thinking. Think of whatever you have as being enough, and then you will be generous. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ showed us in his life. He didn't have enough to eat for most days, but whenever people asked him, he gave them, and he was known as the most generous of the people. And happiness studies, which have a whole field of study has emerged since Easterlings Paradox, which shows that people can be happy in situations which we would think as being incredible, in misery, having disease and having handicaps. It's a question of attuning your heart. So it is not things which buy happiness, it's the attitude with which we face the world. Basically, there are two things which govern. There's the comfort level, how much you, and people can that comfort level changes. And then there's aspirations. If people want things, that makes them unhappy. If they set their aspiration levels to be content with what they have, they are happy with what they have. So, Easterlings Paradox has dramatic implication for the practical conduct of economic policy. If it is true that all this growth that we are pursuing doesn't increase happiness, then maybe we should not pursue growth. In fact, the industrial society is driven by overproduction. People produce and produce and produce because that's the internal dynamic of capitalism. You have to grow. And so when a lot is produced, then you have to make people buy these things. And the way to make people buy these things is to make them feel unhappy with what they have. And this is done on a massive scale. So it's like a drug addiction. I mean, you consume some good and it makes you temporarily happy, but then you get addicted to this level of comfort like air conditioners. And now you can't be happy without, and so you have to work hard to earn money to support this habit. And basically, as since no particular standard of living will make you happy because it becomes the new normal, you keep pursuing higher and higher levels of growth without actually ever achieving. It's a rat race. So the solution to that is to adopt a simple style of living and spread that, because your high standards of living also create negative externalities. Once somebody is driving big cars, other people want to do that too, and that makes them unhappy. Today, the ecological catastrophe that threatens is because people are living lifestyles which are far beyond the capacity of the planet to sustain. And so environmentalists and ecologists are saying that we need to do degrowth. We need to reverse the growth process, and we need to settle for simpler lifestyles so that everybody can enjoy. And actually, there are enough resources already to feed, clothe, house, educate, take care of health needs of everybody on the planet. And we have had that for a century at least. But this greed for always more, which never is satiated, this is what's driving the planet to destruction. So how will we how will we achieve simplicity? Again, the change has to come from our hearts, not from the external environment. So the Quran provides us with a strategy. It says that you will never attain the good unless you spend in the way of Allah from what you love. So what is needed is that we need to cleanse our hearts of the love of materials and comforts. And how do we do that? Well, the Quran says, give away the things that you love the most, and that will reduce your love of material things, and it will enable you to live simply. One of the crucial things is to distinguish between needs and wants. What are the things that I need to live? Those are very important, and the Quran strongly encourages us to acquire a comfort level. This is very different from the Christianity which favors monasticism. Give away the world and don't enjoy life. And so the Quran says, be comfortable, enjoy, wear nice clothes, but don't waste. So it's very simple. If you need something, if it makes you happy, do it, but don't do wasteful consumption. That is haram, that's prohibited. And it's actually massive amount of waste that's causing the scarcity that we see. Because economic theory says that consumers are sovereign. We don't distinguish between needs and wants, and our job is to fulfill all wants. This is ridiculous. We fulfill genuine wants, for sure. If somebody wants food, it's our job to make sure that he gets it. But if somebody wants to enjoy sunset in the island of Bali, that's not something it's our job to fulfill. So economists are doing the wrong job. Once you focus on making the job of economists to fulfill the basic needs of everyone, this is a job that can be done. There is no scarcity which is in the way. Rather, the problem is greed and possessiveness and inequality. These are the main problems of economics. So, what are the steps that we need to take? The first step was to unite the hearts. That's how the state of Medina was created. There was lots of tribal rivalries. Those were strongly discouraged, and in fact, the uniting of the hearts in love, this was the great achievement of Islam. Today, the hybrid warfare that has been invented as a strategy in the past, see, after the Vietnam War, the Americans came to the realization that the war was lost not in the battlefield, but in the TV sets in the home. So from then on, they have been working on this concept of hybrid warfare, which means that you attack the nation not by a military, but on all its fault lines. So in Pakistan, we have a huge number of fault lines. We have the Shia-Sunni split, we have the Barelvi-Deobandi split, we have the secular people and the religious people, we have provincial splits, we have tribals, we have linguistic splits, and all of these are actually being exploited specifically and deliberately to create disunity. So it's again a question of the heart. We can clean our hearts of all of this petty things which separate us, and realize that the bonds of humanity that we share are much stronger than anything which separates us, whether it's tribe or religion or wealth. All of these divisors are very small in relation to the common bonds that I am a human being and you are a human being. That automatically means that we share a huge number of things. And it doesn't matter if we speak different languages. I know that without knowing anything about I know that your heart feels compassion for others, because this is how human beings are built. So, the Islamic society is built on cooperation and social responsibility. They feed for the love of Allah, the indigent, the orphan, and the captive. For 1,000 years in the Islamic civilization, education, health, and welfare were joint social responsibilities. There was no concept of paying for these. So this idea of the market society, that you have to pay for your education, you have to pay to get health services, this is an alien idea, a stranger to Islam. It's very peculiar that as long as, you see, it's basically a question of a heart, that all the children in Pakistan are my children. To take care of them is my responsibility. The hadith says that a believer cannot sleep with a full stomach when his neighbor is hungry. So the society as a whole must arrange to provide for social needs of the people. So one of the central attitudes that we need to change is what to do with excess wealth. Now the capitalist system says that put it in the bank and make, if you have $1 million that's extra, make more millions. This is again something laughable, ridiculous. Why? I mean, if I have enough for my needs and there are other people who need, then I should give, and I should give to those people who are in need. This again comes from distinguishing between needs and wants. So in a cooperative society where we are all brothers, the need for precautionary savings is reduced substantially. I don't need to worry about catastrophic event and save $1 million to help me in case I get cancer, because everyone will come to my aid if I am in need, and the social responsibility means that I will also go to their aid when they are in need. So this is the spirit of takaful versus spirit of insurance. In takaful, we take care of each other. In insurance, this is a private gamble between me and the insurance company. It's an adversarial contract in which if I win, they lose, and if they win, I lose. So actually, now this is not an easy thing to achieve. To illustrate this, we tried to do this in PIDE, and basically this is the same problem, that people are used to thinking in market terms. So if I offer a takaful contract, they say, okay, I have to pay this much premium, and my health needs are likely to be not that high, so I shouldn't do it. So if you sell takaful as an insurance, it will not work, because when you do the cost-benefit calculations, you will not succeed, you will not see the benefits, because it has to be a favorable contract to the company. But the kafil is, I'm paying this money to take care of anyone who needs it. So if you frame the problem in this way, that in my organization, somebody or the other is going to be sick, and I should be taking care of them. When you frame it this way, then it makes sense, and then it can be implemented, but it requires thinking in a different way. So there are some institutional structures of cooperative and generous societies which are different from the institutional structures of capitalist societies. So in Islamic world, 1/3 of the land in the Ottoman Empire was devoted to waqf. So when people have more money than they can use, they spend it to build institutions to take care of others. In the capitalist society, people take money and put it in the banks. Now, this is not polar opposites. There are foundations for social welfare in capitalism as well, and there are places where you can store money in Islam well. It's just a question of emphasis. What is the main thing? The kafil versus insurance we've already discussed. In the perfect competition, you see, we say that every firm is greedy and they are looking out for their interests. So how can we protect ourselves? We put a lot of firms and they compete with each other so that no one firm can rob us blind. Monopolies are very bad. Now, in the Islamic civilization, we had guilds. The guilds were driven not by the profit motivation. It was a monopoly, but it was driven by the idea of providing service. So once the issue is that the doctors as a whole are responsible to provide health service to the civilization, then the entire framework changes, and guilds which are worked very efficiently and very well to provide the service, but if in a capitalist mode, they will be very harmful. So the real goal is spiritual progress. It is not getting the world. So if we work hard, if the whole world becomes better and we all live in palaces and we have cars and luxuries and comforts, but the heart is the same, then we haven't achieved anything. The progress is by spiritual progress. So the stages are that they start with nafs ammara, which is exactly Homo economicus. You pursue your desires. Then if you make spiritual progress, you achieve nafs al-lawwama, which is the self-blaming soul. So you are aware that if you cause harm to others, you feel it and you feel guilty about it, and you try to change, and ultimately you can come to nafs al-mutmainnah, which is the highest stage. But this is not done in Islam by sitting in caves and contemplating. This is done by struggling with the world, trying to achieve justice, trying to fulfill your social responsibilities. So this is an entirely different paradigm. Change is driven by the heart and not by external circumstances, not FDI, and it's not building factories, and it's not doing all of the 20 steps that are recommended in the New Washington Consensus. It is by working on the hearts. And so I'll end with one share, which is a verse from that. Okay, ये अक्ल वाले यूं ही हमेशा हमें फरेबे कमाल देंगे, जनू के दामन से फूल चुनकर खिरद के दामन में डाल देंगे. So it means that these people of the brains, that's referring to the West, I'm reinterpreting, the people with the brains will always deceive us. They will take the flowers and the fruit which are due to the passions, which real drivers, and attribute them. They will place these flowers at the feet of the altar of the goddess of reason. They will tell us that all of this has been achieved by logic and by science and by technology, whereas the driver is always the heart. Thank you.